Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to show you how I make my super cute watercolor Mermaid Peekaboo keychains. I'm starting off with a 3-inch round acrylic blank from Zindy.com. I'll link them down in the description box below as well, along with everything else I use in this video today, of course. But I'm just peeling off the brown protective paper that comes on the blanks. Both sides are covered and I just want to work with one for right now. So I'm going to peel that paper off and I'm going to give them a good sand. It's really important to sand your acrylic blanks so that all of your design work has good adhesion to it. So after I'm done sanding, I'm just going to give them a little spritz with alcohol, wipe them off really good, make sure there's no residual liquid or any dust stuck to them, and then we'll be ready to start designing. I'm going to make my keychains using a similar technique to how you would peekaboo a tumbler, with the exception that the glitter goes at the end instead. So right now I'm just laying out my scale pattern. I've cut this out of Aura Mask that I bought at Expressions Vinyl. I'm just going to lay that out on all 5 of my keychains, and after I get that placed, I'm going to throw them on a spare piece of cardboard so I can carry them outside and have a little way to hold them while I spray paint them. So I prefer flat white spray paint, but you can use any white spray paint that you want. If you want to really mix it up, you could even use a colored paint. Once those are fully dried, we're ready to start decorating them. So today I'm going to use 3 alcohol inks from Tim Holtz. One is Purple Twilight, one is Raspberry, and the last one is Mermaid. I'm also going to fill one of the wells in my little paint holder here with alcohol. Sometimes you just need to dip your brush and lighten up things or blend them a little bit, so it's handy to have. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this like really distressed Wet n Wild makeup brush, and I'm just going to kind of use a pouncing motion to dab my inks on. So I'm just going to pick a color randomly and start wherever I want on the blank. The only thing you want to be careful of is you don't want to have a harsh line where you can clearly see that there's like, oh, a triangle of blue here and a triangle of pink here. You want it to really blend together. So I'm just going to pick whatever color I feel like starting with, and then I'll kind of dip a little bit of the edge of my brush into alcohol as well, just to kind of help blend things together. And you're going to cross over from one color into the other color, and it sort of makes a new shade of blue as we mix them here. So the beauty of the alcohol inks is you can keep working with these until you're happy with the result. If you find there's an area that's really kind of too dark for your liking, just dab your brush in a little bit of alcohol and go back over it, and it'll substantially lighten it up. And when you see me lift the blank out of frame, I'm not actually looking at it. I'm sort of blowing on it a little bit to help dry those inks a little bit faster. If I get my brush a little bit too damp and I'm afraid it's going to run, I don't want it to do that because it'll mess up my whole design. I'll have to do that area over again. So I'm just going to give it a little blow and make sure that it dries. And then I can kind of see how it's going to look and if I like it. So this one I have finished, and I went ahead and peeled off my stencils and set it to the side, and we're going to do this on the other 4 blanks. Now I know right now it doesn't look super impressive, but once you put your epoxy on, it really brings the design together. Now you'll also notice that I'm sort of rinsing my brush in between colors, and I'm not really cleaning it to be super clean. I just don't want to muddy up the colors too much. So what you'll see me do here is I'll actually dip my brush in the alcohol well and just sort of wipe it on a paper towel in between colors. But when I'm finished with that blank and I'm moving on to the next one, I do give the brush a little bit of a better rinse and a cup of alcohol just to kind of have a fresh slate to start the new one. So right there I noticed a little drop of alcohol splashed on that blank, and I'm just fixing it real quick before I forget. Even though alcohol ink dries really quickly, you don't have to be overly rushed in this process because all it takes is a little dab of alcohol to refresh it, and you can work with it some more. So I'm just going to keep playing with these until I'm really happy with the way they all look. A couple of them I did a little bit darker, some of them I did a little bit lighter. You'll see me get a little bit of fresh pink there because my other one was just a tiny bit watered down. In between each blank, those alcohol inks dry so quickly in the little pan there that I'll just put a little splash of alcohol in them to refresh them before I start. And I just wanted this one to have a little bit more vibrant pink than I had. My pink was a little washed out. So I just got a little bit of fresh ink, and you'll see me sort of kind of mad scientist those inks a little bit as I go. I'll add a little alcohol, I'll add a little more ink, we just never know. These inks are so pretty together. Even the paper towel that I cleaned my brush on looks great. So I'm going to speed this video up while I continue to paint the other blanks, just because I don't want this video to get super long. This kind of keychain is a little bit extra. There's some extra steps involved over just a regular acrylic blank, and we're going to do some beading at the end, which is another step. So I'm just going to speed things up so we can get through this in a timely fashion, but you still get to see all the process. One thing I do want to point out first is just be really careful when you're peeling off your decals not to scratch into your paint. And if you do notice that you did that, stop and leave the decal in place while you dab over it with your paintbrush, then go ahead and peel it off. That way you can fix any problems you might have made, but without leaving ink over the peekaboo area. Woo, okay, we're back. So now I'm just going to apply my decals. I've given these blanks plenty of time to dry, and I've cut these decals out of Expressions Vinyl White. So it says Beam Amazing, and I'm just going to transfer these over with a piece of transfer tape that has been used many, many times before. Therefore, it has a really low tack to it. I don't want to take a brand new fresh piece and go at these blanks because we're putting these decals directly onto our paint, and I don't want to run the risk of peeling anything up. It would be really hard to fix it if we messed it up right now. Now I know it feels like we've done a ton of design work already, but this is actually the last step, is putting the decals on, and then we're ready to seal this side and be done with it. I know a lot of people like to use UV resin for keychains and badge reels, but I've always preferred the look of regular 2-part epoxy resin over the UV version. It gives a better finish in my opinion, and it's a lot more durable. But of course, if UV resin is your jam, that absolutely works here too. So before you begin with your epoxy here, make sure your work surface is totally level. If it's not, you have the risk of all the epoxy running off while you're working on it, and then when you set it aside to sit and dry, it will continue to pool and run, and it'll give you uneven blanks. To cover my blanks, I just pour about a quarter size amount right in the center of my blank. And then I take my popsicle stick and drag through the center and sort of pull it over to the edges. Now epoxy is self-doming and self-leveling, so it'll hold on nicely and not run off the edge. But if you take it too far and push it over the edge, it absolutely will continue to run there because liquid follows liquid. So once you've given it a starting point, it'll run really, really badly. So be careful that you are covering your edges well, but not pushing it over the edge too far. After I cover those edges well, I just take my popsicle stick and sort of make swirls through the middle, and that kind of fills in any of those big gaps that I made while I was dragging it to the edges. And I'm not overly concerned about making sure it's perfect, because when I hit it with my torch to pop bubbles, it's going to smooth and level everything out nicely. So you can see here on camera all the dimples that are there before I torch it, and then they just immediately melt away as soon as I hit it. So I like to have a bright light over my workstation because I use that light to look for any imperfections in my epoxy. You really want to remember when working with the epoxy that less is more. If you have a little spot that isn't fully covered after you've torched it, you can just swirl your popsicle stick around and spread it out. Or if you need one more drop, get a little dab out of your cup and just put that one drop back on it. Sometimes it looks like you need a little bit more, and then you realize you've gone too far and now it's running over the edge. So you really want to be conservative with how much you use. Once I get all those blanks covered with epoxy, I'll just set them to the side and let them cure. And I am using the speed dry like I said, so in about 2 hours they'll be touchable, but I'm going to give them a little bit of extra time to cure. When you first get to the touchable stage, they're what I like to call a soft cure, which means you can still sort of leave impressions in them if something sits on it for a long time. So if I flipped it over and started working on the back side immediately, I might pick up texture from the surface it was sitting on, and I don't want anything to mar my perfect shiny finish, so I'm going to give them a little bit of extra time to cure before I flip them over and start working on them. If you've ever seen anyone accidentally wrap their tumbler in bubble wrap to ship it before it's fully cured and it's picked up those texture marks, you'll know exactly what I mean. Alright, these little beauties are fully cured and ready for the next step. All we have left is to glitter the backs, but before we do that, I want to clean up this spray paint overspray that's on the sides of my acrylic blank. So all I'm going to do that is take a paper towel and squirt some alcohol on it, and I'm just going to go all the way around the edges. Now they do have ridges on them from where they're cut, so sometimes you have to give it just a little bit of elbow grease to get all in those ridges, but it wipes off fairly easily. So at this point, these are looking great. All I'm going to do now is peel off the paper backing that I left to protect the backside. I'm going to give that acrylic under the paper a good sanding, wipe them with alcohol, just like I did in the first step before we started designing the front, and then we'll be ready for our glitter application. I'm using my Mr. Nola Speed Dry for the back side as well. So I'm just going to mix up a medicine cup full, and then I'm going to add my glitter to it. Now I can do somewhere between 4 and 6 blanks at one time. This is fast set, so you don't have a ton of time to work with, but these circle blanks are really easy to fill in. If you're doing blanks with shapes on them, they're a lot harder to kind of go around and do all the edges, so you may not be able to get as many out of one batch. I'm normally careful not to fill the whole of the blank with epoxy, but it happens to the best of us that sometimes it gets filled in. So I just wanted to show you a tip here really quickly. I take my Dremel and I have an attachment that is very much like a very, very thin drill bit. It's the exact same size as the hole in the blanks. And so if you go straight above and just carefully drill that hole through, it takes about 2 seconds and you have a perfect hole back on your blank. So don't get too stressed out if you accidentally mess it up and fill a hole in. Once we're done with all those steps, this is the gorgeous blank that we are left with, and it is all ready to be beaded and strung. Now it's time for the best part, which is picking adorable beads to put on the keychain. I'm using the 0.8 millimeter elastic string, and I find it's the best thickness because it's super durable and strong, but it's also thin enough to be able to fit through the beads easily. All we're going to do to start is match our edges and put them through the blank. Then I'm going to take that loop and pull the edges through it, and that attaches our blank to the elastic. Then I'm going to give it a good 5 stretches, and that just helps prevent that elastic from ever sagging and showing gaps between our beads. Then I'm going to start with our beads. I like to use 3. These are 20mm bubblegum beads, and then I use 8mm spacers in between. Now these beads are super easy to work with. All the holes are pre-drilled in them, so you don't have to worry about any of that. If you have one that maybe wasn't drilled super well, I just run my X-Acto around the top and bottom rims of the hole, and I've never had any issues getting my string through. So I've got my first bead on, and then I just put on my first spacer. That is a rhinestone spacer with a multicolor shift, so it's a little bit like an AB rhinestone. And then I'll slip on that second bead and do a second spacer. I prefer to do 3 beads and 2 spacers per keychain, but you can absolutely switch that up. You can do no spacers, you can do extra, you could do fewer beads, you can do anything you want with these. That's sort of the best part of them. So now I've got my beads and spacers all threaded on. I'm just going to match my ends up, and I'm going to take this little tiny lobster clasp, and I'm just going to make sure that I have a good grip on those little ends, because the lobster clasp is very small, and so I really am threading it through kind of like threading a needle, and the elastic just fits. So if I have a real slack line, it's not going to go through easily. So I'm just going to hold it tight and push that through. And then I'm going to take my strings and pull that clasp out of the way and go back down through my top bead. Then I'm going to hold on to the lobster clasp and pull it very tightly so that's very snug and there's no slack in it. And then I'm just going to wrap both strings around and make a regular old knot out of it here. So you want to make sure that you hold on to the top of that lobster clasp as you go to pull your knot tight, because you want it to stay snug. If there's any slack in it, the beads will spread apart and you'll have a really sort of sad looking keychain in the end. So I've got my knot tied and in place, but now I'm going to hold this lobster clasp and I'm going to pull that string really firmly, and that's going to give me a really snug knot right there. Then I'm going to go ahead and loop it around, and I'm going to tie a second knot just the exact same way in the same place. And then again, I'm going to hold the lobster clasp and I'm going to give that elastic string a really good tug to make sure I've got that knot really tight and seated in the best place. So once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to lay it down and do a regular like right over left style knot, just like how you begin to tie your shoes. And I'm going to tie 2 of those. Now I'm going to tie 2 knots just like this, and between each one I'm going to pull it really snug. Then I'm going to snip off the extra band, and I'm only going to leave about 1/4 of an inch, and then I just give a little tug on that lobster clasp and that knot will slip right into that top white bead and stay hidden. All that's left for us to do now is attach the keychain portion. The standard ones that I buy come with a little bit of chain hanging down on them, and I don't use them for anything, and they're not very aesthetically pleasing. So I just go ahead and take them off and set them to the side, and then I slip my lobster clasp in and roll it right into the keyring like normal. And now our keychain is all finished and ready to go. I made 5 of these adorable keychains in this mermaid tutorial, but here at the end I'm also going to show you my super cute Queen Bee keychain, which is made to match my Bee Queen tumblers. So it's the exact same technique with different colored alcohol inks and different colored beads, but this is just to show you that you can really experiment and have a lot of fun with this technique. As always, thanks for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to see more lives, tutorials, or just ask questions, you can join us over on Facebook. My group is Add a Bit of Bling Creative Community, and we'd love to have you. I can't wait to see what you create. Thanks for watching and have a great day.